What does it take for a man to break? Not physically, not in the way bones snap or bruises bloom, but spiritually, when everything he thought he was evaporates, when the mirror no longer reflects a person, but a failure, a ghost of who he once hoped to be. He never thought he'd get there. Not him. Not the man who used to lead the charge, who once had plans tattooed into his soul. But life, when it decides to tear you down, doesn't knock politely. It rips the floor out from under you, and for 90 days, that's exactly what it did. His name was Jonah. Just Jonah. And if you had passed him 3 months before the storm, you would have said he was winning at life. He had the job, the fiancé, the apartment with exposed brick and a view of the skyline. But sometimes, the illusion of stability is the most dangerous thing of all, because when the fall comes, you never see it coming. It started with a phone call, one that splintered the air with words too sharp to understand. There'd been an accident. His younger brother, his best friend, his childhood mirror, was gone. A freak crash. No last words, no goodbye, just silence. Something in Jonah cracked open that day, and it wasn't grief in the clean, manageable form we imagine. It was wildfire, irrational, bitter, and unrelenting. He started to shut down, skipped work, missed deadlines, pushed his fiancée away. He didn't cry. He couldn't. He just stopped living, and then came the second strike. The company he worked for, a startup that once promised family, let him go. Downsizing, restructuring, call it what you want. It felt like betrayal. 2 weeks later, his fiancée packed her bags, said she didn't recognize him anymore, that he had become a shadow, and like that, Jonah lost his job, his partner, and his home. In just under a month, everything collapsed. All that remained was an old, rusted sedan and the bills that kept coming like vultures. So he started sleeping, in the car. Night after night, curled into the back seat like a broken question mark, using a gym towel as a pillow and an army coat he'd found in his trunk as a blanket. Every morning, he'd walk into a 24-hour gym, not to work out, but to clean himself up, face splashed with cold water, clothes changed in a bathroom stall. He looked just like any tired guy heading into work, except there was no job, no destination, just time and pain, and a desperate need to make it to the next sunrise. For 90 days, Jonah lived this silent war. There were moments, dark, hollow ones, where the thought of just disappearing came knocking, when a bottle seemed kinder than a sunrise, when he screamed into the windshield just to prove he still had a voice. But here's the thing about some men. They don't break. They bend. They burn. But somewhere inside, in a place no storm can reach, something survives. One night, the coldest in months, Jonah hit his bottom. The kind of night when frost creeps onto glass like ghostly fingers. His car wouldn't start. His phone was dead. His stomach was empty. And for a terrifying moment, he felt nothing. Not pain, not hope, not fear. But then something strange happened. In the pitch-black silence of that freezing cabin, Jonah remembered something his brother once told him. They were teenagers, talking about the future, and his brother said, "No matter what happens, don't ever let the world decide who you are. You choose, even if you're in the mud, especially then." And that night, Jonah made a choice. Not a loud one, not the kind you post online, but a quiet, blood-deep vow that this would not be the end of his story. The next morning, Jonah woke up with frost on his eyelashes and a tremor in his bones. But his eyes were different. Something had flickered on again. Not hope, exactly, but defiance. And in some strange way, that was even more powerful. He walked into the gym like he did every day. But instead of heading to the bathroom stall, he paused in front of the weight room. For months, he'd avoided it. He didn't feel worthy of being seen, didn't want people to look at him or worse, pity him. But that morning something cracked. He stepped onto the rubber floor, picked up a single kettlebell, and started to move. Slowly, silently. Reps turned into sets. Sweat became ritual. And for the first time in months, he wasn't running from pain. He was channeling it. That gym became his altar, not because it fixed everything, but because it gave him structure. A place to pour the chaos. The discipline he once reserved for his job or his relationship now became devotion to himself. Every day, he trained like a man possessed. And not for aesthetics, not for a before and after photo. He trained because it was the one thing he could control. And in that brutal routine, something began to shift. He started talking to the staff, offering to help, cleaning up weights others left behind. Eventually, one of the trainers noticed. "You here every day," he said. "You work harder than most of the people who pay to be here." Jonah nodded, unsure of what to say. The trainer looked him in the eyes. "You ever think of doing this for real?" That question would change everything. At night, Jonah began studying. Not scrolling social media or numbing out with distractions, but devouring textbooks on physiology, nutrition, movement science. He'd spend hours in the backseat of his car, under a cracked dome light, taking notes with fingers still sore from deadlifts. The hunger was back, but this time, it wasn't for approval or status. It was for mastery. He got certified, scraped together every penny he had, took the cheapest online course he could find, but passed with perfect marks. And when the manager of the gym offered him a janitor job, just a few hours a night, minimum wage, he took it without hesitation, not because of the money, but because it gave him access. Access to equipment, to people, to possibility. Bit by bit, Jonah climbed. He became the guy who opened the gym before sunrise, who helped others with form, who started coaching, unofficially at first, then with a growing base of regulars who felt something in him, not just knowledge, but experience. He wasn't teaching from theory. He was teaching from the fire, and when he finally saved enough to rent a room, just a small studio with no furniture, except a mattress on the floor, it felt like a palace, because he'd earned every inch of it. That first night in a bed again, he didn't cry. He stared at the ceiling and whispered the same words over and over. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Because the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Jonah didn't chase success. He chased consistency. While others waited for motivation, he built systems. Wake at 4:30, cold shower, 10-minute breath work, lift heavy, coach with full presence, study, repeat every single day. And here's what nobody tells you. When you keep showing up, even in silence, the world eventually notices. One morning, a man walked into the gym, mid-40s, suit, disconnected eyes. He'd gained weight, lost confidence, didn't believe change was possible anymore. But Jonah saw him, not just his body, his pain. He trained him like his life depended on it. Weeks passed. The man dropped 15 pounds. But more than that, he smiled again, looked people in the eye. He told Jonah, "You didn't just help me get strong, you helped me get me back." That client referred 3 more. Those 3 brought 5. Jonah didn't advertise. His results did. He kept his rates humble. He remembered what it was like to count pennies for protein powder. But his impact kept growing, and then came the moment that would define everything. The gym announced it would close. Corporate decision, new investors. Staff would be let go. Trainers left scrambling, but Jonah? He didn't panic. He prepared. Months earlier, he'd been saving silently. Not for a car, not for clothes, for something he couldn't name yet. But when the opportunity knocked, he answered without fear. He asked the manager if he could buy some of the equipment being liquidated, used, worn, rusted, but perfect. He found a warehouse, abandoned, dusty, full of spiders and holes in the drywall. But to Jonah, it was a cathedral. He spent weeks cleaning it with his own hands, sanded the floors, painted the walls, installed makeshift lighting. It wasn't pretty, but it was his. He called it the Foundry. Because this wasn't just a gym, it was a place where people came to be forged. No mirrors, no ego, just raw transformation. People laughed at first, said it looked like a prison. But Jonah welcomed that. Prison of comfort is what broke us. Pain is where we remember who we are. Within 3 months, the Foundry was at capacity. Clients came not just to lift weights, but to lift shadows. Former addicts, burnt-out executives, single mothers, veterans, men who hadn't cried in decades until they hit their knees mid-set. Jonah didn't just change bodies. He rewired souls. And then came the email. A major podcast had heard of him. They invited him to share his story. He hesitated. He wasn't doing this for fame, but he knew someone, somewhere, needed to hear what pain could become. He went on, told the truth. Every brutal, beautiful second of it. The episode went viral, 100,000 views, then 1 million. He didn't sell a course, didn't launch a product. He just kept showing up. And within weeks, a silent investor reached out, a man who'd lost his son to depression. He said, "You're doing more than fitness. You're saving people. Let me help." They expanded, opened a second location, this time with full mental health support built in. Therapists on site, meditation rooms, group sessions after lifting. And through it all, Jonah remained the same. Woke at 4:30, trained like his life depended on it, because in many ways, it still did. He never forgot those 90 days in the car. They weren't a curse, they were initiation. That's why we give voice to the impossible, so no one forgets what they're capable of. They say scars fade with time. But Jonah wore his like armor. He didn't hide what he had been through. He taught from it. Every session, every rep, every word carried the weight of those nights in the car, the cold metal against his back, the echo of a world that had forgotten him. But he had not forgotten himself. And now, he refused to let others forget their own fire. The Foundry became more than a gym. It was a movement, a quiet revolution of the broken, the overlooked, the ones who were told they'd never make it back. But they did, because Jonah showed them how. He brought in guest coaches, former inmates turned mentors, soldiers turned breathwork teachers, women who had escaped abuse and were now empowering others. Every Saturday the lights dimmed. People sat on the floor, sweating from the workout, eyes closed. Hearts open, Jonah would speak, not like a guru, like a brother. He told stories of the cave, of pain as a forge, of how rock bottom wasn't the end. It was where you find the ground to push off from. One night, a man stayed after class, late 20s. Quiet, clearly battling something heavy. Jonah sat with him. "I don't think I'll make it," the man whispered. Jonah looked him dead in the eye. Neither did I. They sat in silence. No advice, no quick fixes, just presence. That man is now one of the head coaches, because pain, when faced, becomes legacy. Jonah's story spread further. A major magazine featured him. Headline, "From car seat to CEO." He didn't care about the title, but he knew the story could be someone's turning point. He began traveling, speaking at youth centers, jails, rehab clinics, places where hope was just a rumor. And every time he told his story, he made sure to leave them with one truth. You're not broken, you're becoming. He wrote a book, not a bestseller, a soul stirrer, self-published, raw, honest. It sold 10,000 copies in the first month, not because of ads, because of truth. He poured everything into the Foundry. Now 3 locations, each one different, but the same code on the wall. We don't rise despite the pain. We rise because of it. People tattooed those words, because they lived them. And Jonah? He still drives the same car, the one he once slept in, not out of necessity, out of reminder. Every time he turns the key, he remembers what it means to lose everything and build something greater from it. He parks behind the gym, steps inside at dawn, still the first to train, still the last to leave. Not because he has to, because this is his cathedral, his battlefield. his home. One morning, the sun hadn't yet broken over the skyline. Fog hovered low like a ghost clinging to the city. Jonah stood alone in the foundry's main hall, barefoot, drenched in silence, staring at the very spot where, years ago, he had collapsed in exhaustion after his first solo workout. When the gym was just a dream sketched in sweat and suffering, he knelt, placed his palms on the ground. This floor held my blood, my tears, my resurrection. It wasn't about the weights, or the mirror, or the followers online. It was about remembering what most forget. The only freedom worth chasing is the one you build from within. Later that day, a letter arrived. No return address, just 4 words scribbled on a torn envelope. You saved my life. Inside, a photo of a teenage boy, smiling, strong, standing outside one of Jonah's gyms. Jonah wept. Not loudly, not dramatically, but the kind of tears that carry the weight of 1,000 nights in a car. The kind of tears that come when you realize your suffering wasn't wasted. It became someone else's salvation. This is what they never tell you about purpose. It's not glamorous. It doesn't come from comfort. It's forged in isolation, in rejection, in rock-bottom moments that almost destroy you. And when you rise, when you crawl out of the cave, when your breath steadies again, you don't just carry your story, you carry a map for someone else. The gym kept growing, but Jonah refused to expand like a corporation. Every new location had to be earned, not with money, but meaning. Each one needed a story, a heartbeat, a local. Jonah to lead it. He didn't want an empire, he wanted a movement. One day, a journalist asked him, "What's the hardest thing you've ever done?" Jonah didn't pause, didn't blink. Choosing not to give up, when giving up felt like mercy. The article went viral. But Jonah barely noticed. He was in the back room mopping the floor, because that's what he did when things got overwhelming. He returned to the basics, to the rhythm of effort, to the humbling act of service. His face began appearing on podcasts, documentaries, even a major film studio called. But Jonah turned it all down. "Tell the story," he said, "but keep the truth. Don't polish the pain, because pain is not the enemy. Forgetfulness is." He didn't want people to admire him. He wanted them to see themselves in him. The sleepless nights, the shame, the quiet private victories no one ever applauds. That's where greatness is born. Not on stages, not in spotlights, but in cars, alone, in the cold. There's a moment, somewhere between the past and the future, where silence becomes sacred, where you stop running, stop proving, stop performing, and you just stand still, alone, naked of titles, stripped of applause, unarmed by ambition, and you ask yourself, if I had to lose it all again, would I survive? Jonah knew his answer, because he had lost it all, and not just once. People think the final victory is the moment you make it, when the money rolls in, when the gym fills up, when the scars become trophies, but they're wrong. The real victory is when you change who you are, not for applause, but for peace. When your old self dies, and you don't resurrect it just to feel familiar. When you bury the shame and keep walking, even when guilt tries to crawl out of the grave. When you stop asking the world for permission, because you already paid for your freedom in full. Jonah never chased fame. He chased honesty. He didn't want a perfect story. He wanted a true one. The man who once slept in a car through freezing nights and blistering summers now stood before a crowd of 500 people, each one transformed by a program he built from the ashes. But before speaking, he closed his eyes. He remembered the metal roof above his head, the hunger that made him dizzy, the cold sweat on his skin after panic attacks, the whispered prayers into the steering wheel, and he smiled, not because it was over, but because it mattered. He stepped to the mic, took a breath, and said something that no one expected. "I'm not special. I'm not chosen. I just stopped lying to myself." You could hear the silence swallow. "The room," he continued, Pain is a mirror. It shows you what's broken, but also what's unbreakable. And once you've seen that truth, no one can ever take it from you. People cried. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. And real is rare. So if you're watching this, feeling lost, forgotten, broken, remember, the road back is brutal, but it's walkable, and sometimes crawling is still forward. Just don't stop, not tonight, not like this, because someone, somewhere, is waiting for your story to become their map. Stories like Jonah's deserve to be told, and that's exactly what we do here. If this moved you, don't just let it fade. Watch this story again. Let it sink in, and explore more stories like this. One on our channel, You Are Not Alone. Subscribe to join us. Your journey deserves to be heard too.